And this next session is the last of our Little Goes a Long Way sessions. Both the speakers today you've seen before on stage. Rebecca came runner-up in the poster competition yesterday, and Oban is also a winner because he didn't get his hands stigmated yesterday during the dinner magic session. So they've both entertained us already, and we're really looking forward to what you've got to say about your apprenticeships. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Oban Jones, and I'm one of the first Lloyd's Register Foundation funded apprentices at Plymouth Marine Laboratory. And this afternoon, I want to talk to you about my story of how really a little goes a long way. So this story starts about 2 years ago, and I was in school in the final weeks of my GCSE exams. And I was thinking to myself, what am I going to do next? And I really didn't have any sort of plan. I knew I could kind of go down the traditional route of A-levels and go to a local college, but I wanted to do something different with my time. So I was looking around, and I came across this position, this apprenticeship position at Plymouth Marine Laboratory. And at the time, I had never heard of Plymouth Marine Laboratory, and I didn't really know much about apprenticeships. But it looked really interesting, and at the time, I was interested in all things sort of marine, living in the southwest. So, yep, I applied, and I went through the interview process, and I was employed. And I remember sitting at my desk at the end of my first day, and I was completely overwhelmed at the lab. And I thought to myself, well, how am I going to fit in here? You know, there's such a wide range of science going on here. How am I, somebody that's just come from school, going to fit in? But anyway, the foundation funding was soon put to good use, training Rebecca and myself. We were trained in maritime skills such as sea survival and ROA powerboating, ready to go out on our ships, along with in-house laboratory training. And we were soon ready to join the Western Channel Observatory sampling team. Now, this is a group of people that sample a range of sites just off of the coast of Plymouth in the southwest. And we take water samples, we use electronic sensors, and we take this data, we analyze it back in the lab, and then we publish it in various ways. I personally have been heavily involved in the use of autonomous buoys and sensor platforms on those. We have 2 at the moment. I've been involved in the maintenance, the development, and the use of those, particularly taking the data off of those buoys, processing it, and then putting it onto our public website. And I find it really important, actually, to share this data that we collect, not only within the scientific community, but with the public. And these data sets, I find them very interesting, and I'm sure other people do. I mean, if you wanted to go out on your yacht, say, for the day, in the southwest, you could look at the data for the wave height. You know, small things like that. It's a really good resource to share. And that's not the only way we've been sharing our work. We've been quite heavily involved with outreach events in the southwest, particularly at local schools, local aquariums, reaching out to school-aged children at STEM events, giving them an insight to the work we've been doing, sort of the sort of research that goes on in the southwest. And it's a really nice thing to do because we can show these young children how really for them it's their future, and they can get into science at a young age like we have. And it's nice to see that these children, their faces light up, and it makes you think that perhaps the future's in good hands. But I believe it is, and particularly for us at the Western Channel Observatory, we're currently in a big stage of development. We're having a large building refurbishment, giving us a whole new suite of facilities. We're currently going to tender for a really world-class, one-of-a-kind data buoy platform, which the data sets produced from that will be completely unique, and we hope to share those in new ways, branching out to new sets of people and just sharing it as well as we can, making sure this resource is available for all. But yeah, I'm going to pass on to my fellow apprentice, Rebecca May, and she's going to talk to you a little bit more about the future.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Becca. I started off in a similar position to Oban, really. I left school with a few A-levels and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with them. So I sort of avoided rushing off to uni, and instead I got a full-time job waitressing while I sort of figured it out. But about a year later, I was still working there, still hadn't really figured anything out. So I started to look at apprenticeships, because obviously I was panicking a little. It took me a while, but I eventually managed to come across the PML laboratory technician apprenticeship. And even though I didn't have an overly scientific background, it sort of sounded like the kind of thing that I really would enjoy. It was a really unique opportunity. So I applied, obviously I got the job. A few weeks later, started there. The first thing that we learned really for both of us was how to work safely in the lab. So this included safe sampling at sea, because we do a lot of field work and a lot of seawater sampling, obviously. Working safely in the lab, so following safe protocols, wearing the correct PPE, as you can see in the photo, and also the safe storage and disposal of chemicals. So once I had a really strong understanding of these things, I was able to begin training in some of the core measurements that we take as part of one of our time series. So we basically go to the same sampling site just off the shore of Plymouth once per week. It's part of a large time series that we have of over 30 years. So we basically carry out, people at PML have been carrying out these measurements for over 30 years. So this includes flow cytometry, which is basically the analysis of phytoplankton community structures and the ways in which they change seasonally and through the water column. And also gas chromatography to analyse dissolved gases in the seawater. These kind of measurements as part of a long time series are really important to us, because if anything changes in the data, we can start to ask why, and we can also use the information that we've sort of collated over this long time to make predictions about the future behaviour of the ocean and the ways in which that it could influence society. So one of the things that really stood out to me that I really loved about the job was the fieldwork aspect, and I was lucky enough to be able to take this to the extreme last September when I was asked at short notice to stand in for a colleague and take part in a 6-week research cruise. So the guy that I stood in for, he was supposed to be calibrating the oxygen sensor that we had on the ship. He couldn't go for his own reasons, so I kind of agreed nervously to stand in at the last minute. It was really daunting and kind of terrifying, because I was so new to marine science and everybody else on the ship seemed like experts in what they did. But obviously I agreed to do it, and I had an amazing 42 days at sea, where we stopped the ship twice per day to sample from 78 stations throughout the Atlantic, as you can see there. So I was responsible, like I said, for measuring dissolved oxygen concentrations in order to calibrate the sensor. So that's what I'm doing on the left there. And also, again, I was doing flow cytometry to analyse phytoplankton communities throughout the Atlantic and through the water column. And that's just a picture of me there taking samples from the rosette. So obviously that was an amazing opportunity. Moving towards the future, Oban and I have actually both recently been offered open-ended job contracts to work with PML. So we're really happy about that. I'm again going to be taking part in that research cruise again this year. So again, that's amazing stuff. We've got our final exam soon, so we do like a BTEC in applied science alongside the course, basically, as it's like the qualification that we get out of it. So we should be completing that soon, if it all goes well. We hope to carry on with further training throughout our careers, really, and also to continue taking part in outreach events. To sort of, we've been talking to like younger children and stuff about what we've been doing and hoping to inspire them to maybe take this route one day if they're interested. And we'd like to say a massive thank you to the Lloyd's Register Foundation and Richard, because obviously we literally couldn't have done it without your funding and your support, and also a thank you to PML for supporting us throughout. It's been an amazing opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Okay, well, I mean, it's so inspiring to see, I think we've all been in your position where you sit there and think, what am I going to do next? and maybe a year later, oh, what am I going to do next? Yeah. So we've all been there, and really admire the route that you've taken to do that. So who has some questions for Rebecca and Oban? Gosh, there we are. Tim, hello.
As expected, really fascinating and brilliant presentation. Thank you. we've spoken previously, of course. I just wanted to find out a little bit more about the time series data collection that you're doing, Rebecca, and whether or not it is showing anything quite interesting over the past few years, or if there are any recent changes that are going to affect your work and the work of PML in the future.
One thing that has recently happened is we sort of help out, both of us actually, with they do like a benthic survey, so just sort of surveying the benthos, which is like the seabed. And recently there was like a change in Plymouth. They used to dredge the seafloor from the dockyard and they would dump it somewhere, but they've moved it now right to our sampling site. So it's obviously, like we think that it's quite toxic stuff that they're dumping there. So that's kind of a new thing that's happened quite recently. That was sort of in the process of seeing what the effects of that are going to be.
So we can use, so we really wanted to study how maybe where it's dumped and the sort of drifts from it. So we have all sorts of people that can do that. But one of those is we have turbidity sensors, and we can send those down to the seabed, and we can see how far it's spread and what maybe get an idea of what's actually in this sediment that's being dumped there. Particularly for us, because we don't want it ruining our lovely clean site, which is which we've been looking at for such a long time. And we don't really know what's in that sediment yet, but we know that it really, even though it's being dumped close to 8 miles away, it's, with tidal flows, it's pretty much covering the sort of bottom couple of meters of the water column, and I wouldn't be able to say if it's harmful yet, but maybe somebody it could definitely affect the sort of benthic life there. But that's one thing. Yeah.
So I've got a question for you, because we talk a lot about mariner safety and a lot about seafarer safety, but we haven't actually looked much at research cruises and what happens on board a research cruise. So what, from your observations, have you experienced any unsafe moments, or do you see anything on board that you think, wow, that's a real safety challenge?
I've always thought they've been really good, actually. When I went on the cruise, so obviously I was on like a big ship, and we did drills for all sorts of different situations, like fire drills, and like we had to get in the lifeboats and stuff just so that we would know how to do it. They were very on top of safety. You always had to have your PPE on at all times and stuff. And it's the same on the Quest as well, our smaller vessel.
Yes, so we have the Plymouth Quest, and you say it's small, but it's a very capable ship, 150 tons actually. So we actually trial all sorts of safety systems. We've recently been trialing, we've been allowing people to use it as a ship of opportunity. Recently, one thing we've been trialing is it's a small sort of loop that attaches to your life jacket, and it deploys when you hit the water. And the reason for trying that is because before, if two people have been out on a yacht, one goes overboard, even if somebody has a life jacket on and it deploys, it's extremely hard for somebody to lift that person out of the water themselves. They're soaking wet, they'll be very heavy. So what we've been trialing is to see if, I haven't been getting in the water with it, but we've been putting dummies over the side and seeing if we can hook that on, and if you can use some sort of pulley winch to pull them up, and we have been sort of looking at the safety and trying
innovations as well.
That, yeah.
Have we got one final question for Rebecca and Oban before we go off to tea?
Thank you. Apprenticeships are so interesting because we have such a funny view of them, so it's lovely to have a positive view of apprenticeship. Thank you for that. And that is actually my question. Are you finding that, having been through the process, that in your peer group and in your parents' generation, what you've chosen to do is actually seen as something significant rather than, oh, well? Because I think it should be, but I don't know what it's like for your generation.
Yeah, I do know what you mean. A lot of my friends, obviously I did A-level, so a lot of my friends, they did that and then they went to uni. And I went to a grammar school as well, so uni was very much pushed there, and sort of apprenticeships weren't really ever even mentioned. But I think now that I've actually done this and I feel like I've come so far with it already, maybe people are starting to realise that actually that is just as much of a respectable option as university is.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I mean, I've definitely found that when people have asked me now, what are you doing? If I say, oh, I'm doing an apprenticeship, they immediately shut out after that. They think, oh, it's, you know, it's just like a trade. You're working on the building site. But if I don't mention the apprenticeship at first, if I mention the type of science we're doing, the type of place we work at, the type of people we work with, then they start to pay attention, and they start thinking, oh, right, wow, well, you're quite young, so how are you doing that for a starter? And then when I later go on to explain that, well, it isn't an apprenticeship, but it really is one of the very first ones of its nature, then they start to, you see them sort of realise, well, maybe they shouldn't have such a closed-minded approach to apprenticeships, and really they are a great scheme to run. Yeah.
Thank you for the great questions, and thank you for thinking that. Thank you. Okay.